Hi comrades, welcome to SPOOKYWEEN. In today's video, we're going to compare a new Netflix movie that just came out called Mr. Harrigan's Phone to the original Stephen King short story. So the movie actually came out today on Netflix and I finished the story today. Only 88 pages long and you can literally find it for free on the internet, the World Wide Web. I actually had the original short story collection called If It Bleeds by Stephen King, which came out in 2020 with like a black cat on the cover, but that was like one of the stories I didn't actually read. Anyways, just like any other Stephen King book or short story, it was quite long, not like pages wise, but just like a lot of filler that didn't really need to be there, and the story itself is pretty like easy to explain. I was actually surprised that this was a story that they chose to make a movie about because I don't know, it's not that interesting. It's basically about this boy who gets hired by this billionaire to read him books, and then they become friends over time. The billionaire's name is Mr. Harrigan. Mr. Harrigan does not believe in technology, so Craig, the little boy, decides to buy him an iPhone to kind of show him how you can see the stock market and the daily news that are new instead of getting newspaper, because Mr. Harrigan, just like any other billionaire, loves the stock market. So one day Mr. Harrigan dies, obviously, because he's an old man, and what else can an old man do in the Stephen King book? In the book, Craig actually consciously takes the phone that he gifted him as like a souvenir, like with him, and then he puts it in the pocket of his, I don't know, casket outfit or whatever that he gets buried with. In the movie, he forgets that he has the phone, and then he realizes it later, and he still puts it in the casket. Because Craig misses his old friend so much, he decides to start leaving him voicemails. And Mr. Harrigan responds back with like weird text messages that are like CCTST and like just like random bud dial type messages. Then Craig starts getting bullied, and he complains to Mr. Harrigan about it over voicemail. And guess what happens to the bully? He dies a horrible, horrific death. In the movie, the bully, his name was like Kenny Yankovic or something, he falls off a second-story floor because he was drunk. In the book, he dies because he was choking himself and wanking off at the same time, which had like a slang word for it, which I don't really remember, but like you can just tell how like perverted Stephen King is. I don't know, like if you've read Stephen King, he always has these like, also, I'm sorry, I keep rubbing my eyes, it's kind of late. If you've ever read Stephen King, he kind of writes like weird, he like sprinkles in like weird sexual stuff into his books that don't really matter, but I don't know, Stephen King, you know. This entire story is like over like 10 years of Craig's life. So Craig ends up going to school, like to college, and Mr. Harrigan, by the way, leaves him $800,000 in a trust fund, so Craig is able to go to college. So Craig goes to college. His dad calls him. He's like, hey, your teacher died, like his beloved teacher, Mrs. Hart, I think her name was. Anyway, she was hit by a drunk driver, and the driver didn't really get any repercussions for his crime because he had like a rich dad or something. So guess what Craig did? He called Mr. Harrigan, and he was like, I don't believe that the drunk driver is gonna die. And then guess what happens? He dies. And the way that he dies is he eats a bunch of soap, which was actually in the book too. And guess what kind of soap it was? It was the same soap that the teacher like smelled like. So Craig was like, oh shit, I'm killing people. And then he freaks out and he throws away the phone into a body of water. And that's the end. That's literally it. And the movie was very similar to the short story. It was kind of boring and kind of long. There was nothing scary. Once again, I'm surprised this is what they chose to remake. If I were a screenwriter or whatever, one of the best Stephen King books that should be remade is Misery, because I don't think they remade it since Kathy Bates, I think, played the main character like in the 90s, I believe. That's when the movie came out. Or they should remake Good Marriage, because that story is also really good. Not freaking Mr. Harrigan's phone. Like, this was kind of boring. And I'm really glad it was only 88 pages, because I started reading another Stephen King book called Fairy Tale that literally just came out this year, and I'm like on page 400, and I literally cannot read it anymore. It's just such filler material that doesn't add anything to the story. And I understand Stephen King and it's just how he writes, but it's just like, my dude, get to the point. If I had to rate the story, I would probably rate it like a 4 out of 10. It's not scary, it's not that interesting, nothing really happens. Kind of reminds me of like The Black Phone, sort of, kind of, but also not in a very spooky, scary way. Anyways, I think that's it, comrades. I'll see you tomorrow.